Welcome back, everybody, to episode 13 of the RacePlazaMedia podcast. My name is Milan.
My name is Pia.
And today we're going to be talking about, I don't know why I'm talking like this. I was like 13. I don't know if that's some type of lucky number. I guess for some people it's an unlucky number.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyways, today we're going to talk about the MotoGP race that happened in Italy.
Yes.
We're going to kick it off with a sprint race that I did not watch per usual, but you tuned in for that. So tell me all about it.
Yes. So I watched the sprint race on Saturday, not live, of course, but I did, as soon as I woke up, I watched it because I was really excited to get back into MotoGP. And we've had, I think, a great season so far. I mean, it's definitely been dominated by the Marquez brothers, but it's still been interesting. So I was very much looking forward to this weekend.
Especially also coming from a home race for the Spanish drivers.
Yes.
And especially like, you know, the atmosphere you get in Spain. And then you're going to get the same thing for the Italian drivers in, of course, the Italy race.
Exactly. And the atmosphere was insane.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. So right off the get-go, the sprint started. We had, of course, the three guys on the front row. I'm not going to go through the sprint starting lineup, but so of course we had Marc Marquez in the front, but he had, right before the green flag was starting to wave, he looked at his handlebar and he looked away from the lights. He had reached over to do something. As soon as he got his second hand on the handlebar, the lights went off. So it was insane. So he immediately lost a couple positions. And you know, he has great starts, but he immediately went down, I think, to about sixth place.
He started in first, right?
He started in first. He went down to about sixth. I mean, the bunch is so close together at the beginning. So he was almost right next to ninth place, depending on the placement of the track. So it was like immediate upsets. Like, oh my gosh, Mark had a bad start because he was on the handlebar. But I mean, he was so lucky that he got his hands on the throttle again as soon as the lights went off. So it was like lucky, but also unlucky because there was something with the launcher switch or something like that. So he had a bad start. But then on the other hand, hometown hero Pecco Bagnaia had an excellent start, immediately leading the race, and the crowd went wild. I mean, it was insane because you could hear it through the broadcast. So like goosebumps immediately.
It's also like you have to imagine like these mics are set up to cut out essentially the noise.
Yes.
All like because you can't really hear the bikes or anything like that, and you know it's loud.
Yes.
Right? So imagine how loud the crowd must be for that to be picked up. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And he's had a great history in Mugello, Pecco Bagnaia.
He won the last 2 years.
I think he's won the last 4 years or
4
so.
years,
Like
okay.
he's won a bunch of races there. And historically, Marc Marquez has not been good at Mugello.
I think the last time he won there was 11 years ago.
Exactly. So he has not had the greatest history there. And of course, I mean, they're teammates, but they're also competitors for the championship. Pecco's season, as we know, has not been going the way he wanted to. So this weekend, as much as I'm a Marc Marquez girl, I was definitely rooting a little bit more for Pecco just because I wanted him to have a good home race. And I wanted him, also his confidence to come back up a little bit. So going for him to start right into the first corner, I was like, or to lead right into the first corner, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, this might be Pecco's race. And of course, we had some excellent battling right off the get-go. I mean, for the first 4 to 5 laps, it was beautiful battling between Alex and Pecco. And then, of course, Marc Marquez came immediately back into the top 3, and he was battling there with them. But then I think after about 5 laps, he took the lead.
Yeah, okay.
He took the lead, and then Marc was on his own. He went away with it, which was a bummer because I was so rooting for Pecco. And then also he ended up losing the position to Alex, so he was in third, which is not horrible by any means, but it's not up to his standard.
Yeah.
And then so the end result ended up being Marc coming in first, Alex second, Pecco third. And in his post-race interview, Pecco was also like, he also like apologized to the fans, and he was like, this is all I could do. And it just, it breaks my heart that he's so defeated because I believe he's trying. I mean, why wouldn't he? But it's just so tough to see that because he sees that Marc is clearly working his magic with the bike, and something is not connecting for him.
It is, and it's so interesting also because you would think that it would be the other way around.
Yes.
That Marc being new to the, Ducati factory team, new on the bike. I mean, yes, he rode on a Ducati, but he rode on a different Ducati.
Yes.
And it's so interesting how Marc is so well aligned with this bike.
Yes.
Whereas Pecco's there's a huge disconnect.
Yes. I mean, he's still fighting for podiums and stuff. But
we are
still
talking about, quite a difference because Marc is also winning quite by a margin, at least in Aragon. He obviously did.
Yes.
That's obviously also his track, right? And it's a counterclock, right? A counterclock track. And so it lends to both of his strengths. But it is very interesting.
Yeah.
And I know that last weekend we had this glimmer of hope for Pecco.
Yeah.
It's like, they did some overnight changes and now he's there.
Yes.
And he came in third, right? And so the expectations were, of course, really grand. And it's being his home race, being the Grand Prix that he won 4 years in a row. So it is a little bit, of course, a bummer that he only, quote unquote, came in third.
Yes.
And then going into now the...
Oh, wait, I wanted to just point out a couple more things about the race.
Of course.
Just quickly. So the interesting thing also we had, unfortunately, the KTMs, or two of the main KTMs were a little bit unlucky. Both of them, Brad Binder and Pedro Acosta, started on the hard front tire, which was everybody else was on the medium.
Okay.
And unfortunately, both of them crashed out of the race. So the first one wasn't. So first one was Binder. That was not necessarily. I mean, I don't know if Pedro's was a tire issue as well, but so Binder had gotten together with Digi, and then accidentally, as he was crashing out, he took out Johan Zarco too.
Oh God!
Which was just so heartbreaking. It was like right at the beginning too, and like. John Zarco was like, because it was not his fault. He was just a casualty because Binder went down and because they were so close together. Still at the beginning, he just took Zarco with him. So that was such a bummer. And then just a couple laps later, Pedro Costa wiped out. So both of the main KTMs were out of the race, which is always shitty. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is that Quartararo did have an accident on Friday during free practice where he had hurt his shoulder. He went to the hospital in Florence overnight or in the evening to get checked out, to get the medical okay, which he did. And he was super competitive at the beginning of the race, up in like the top 4. But then as the race was progressing, he was just losing pace and getting taken over. And then he ended up in 10th, which is such a bummer because it's just one place out of scoring position. So heartbreaking. Just like you come back from like a crash, you are hurt and you are competing at the front. And then it's just like, it was so sad to see because he just started tumbling and down and down and down. He went, I was like, no. Such a bummer because he's been having also a really great part of this last couple of races where they have been really excellent for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also good to see Ayogura back on the track.
I was so happy to see him back.
Good to see him back on, recovered, hopefully completely or mostly from his injury or well enough to be competing. Because I do think athletes have this thing where they're like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
When they might not be.
Not 100%.
Or like where it might not be, like, if you would set out one more, it'd probably be more beneficial. But then again, like, that's an extra race where you're missing points and stuff like that. I get it. Okay, good.
Yes, now we can go into the main race.
Yes, let's get into the main Grand Prix that happened today on Sunday. Starting grid, we had Marc Marquez in first place, Pecco Bagnaia in second, and then Alex Marquez finishing up the top 3. Then we had Quartararo in 4th place, Maverick Vinales in 5th, Morbidelli in 6th, and then in 7th place we have Gigi Antonio, and then rounding off the top 10 we had Acosta in 8th, Rins in 9th, and then Bezzecchi, we don't know. The commentators always say Bezzecchi, but they also say Jorge and not Jorge. So who knows?
I know, and then also I'm like, so, I mean, my Italian is very limited, but I know there's this phrase like mi piaci. And I feel like the spelling is also with 2 C's, if I'm not mistaken. So that's why I'm leaning to Bezzecchi instead of Bezzecchi.
That's what I'm also, but who knows? anyways,
We'll
moving on.
we'll have to look it up eventually.
We have to look it up. I would say the start of the Grand Prix was absolutely amazing.
Oh,
The
it was
first
so
5
fun.
laps,
Yes.
there was so much overtaking between the top 3.
Yes.
It was mind-boggling, and there was probably a lot of overtaking in the back, but the cameras was just focused on that because it was literally Mark in the front, then it was Pecco in the front, then eventually it was Alex who overtook both of them.
Yes, but at first it was mostly just Pecco and Mark just back and forth in the slipstream, passing, doing these incredible, really close but really safe overtakes. I mean, safe as in like nobody touched each other for the most part. Then there's one moment where Pecco's front wheel touched Mark's back wheel, but it was not like malicious or in any way. It was just they got together. So Pecco had moved back, and then Alex got in between them. But then Pecco was passing them again. And then there was this beautiful moment where they're in the starting straight, which was great with the slipstream because that always changed it once you're close enough. And then Mark and Pecco were kind of busy with each other. And then Alex came along the side and got into the middle of the two of them. I mean, it was just gorgeous. And then he took the lead for a little bit. And I mean, every time Pecco got to the front or did an overtake, the crowd just went wild. It was so fun to see. And I had so much hope for him. I was anxiety ridden this entire race because I was really hoping that Pecco would have a good race, you know, and would hopefully even make it to the top of the podium just because it was his track, you know, and it was, I was just so rooting for him. So the beginning of the race was just so fun. It was incredible.
Yeah, it was. I think overall, I think this was one of the best races so far this season. I thought just because the start was so competitive and there was so much overtaking, and then later on, even though like the top 3 seemed to have kind of settled in, I thought because you had then Mark in the front, then you had Alex, and then you had Pecco Bagnaia, and I thought for a long time that Pecco was just sitting there and waiting for his move.
I thought so too. I was hoping.
That's what I was
hoping that was the case because he was not too far from Alex.
It seemed like he was maintaining his distance, and maybe he was like, okay, I'm gonna let this happen for now, and then I'm gonna go on the attack.
Yeah, like save my tires a little bit. Give it a moment and then get into attack because there was also nobody too close behind him at that moment because we had some great battling at first between Maverick Vinales and Frankie Morbidelli. However, then Frankie did a really not clean overtake.
Lap 8 that was.
Okay, yeah. So he did like this. There was really no space for him. He got into the inside of Maverick. So when Maverick was leaning into the corner, Frankie was there. I mean, there was no space for him. So Maverick crashed out, and you could see him on the side too. Once he got up, he was just like putting his index finger against his head, and then also like his fist up in the air.
He was like gesturing, and then Morbidelli ended up getting a long lap penalty, which we had talked about that a long lap penalty. I'm uncertain how much time you lose, but it is quite baffling to me. And I'm sure this is like fine with everyone, but you get a long lap penalty and still are potentially in the points, aren't able to score points and do things. Whereas the other person is just like, now you're done. Like Maverick was not able to come back from this, you know, and it seems almost more like slap on the hand. And I get that this was obviously not intentional by Morbidelli, even though it was a bad call. I don't think he was like he wasn't purposely trying to crash out Maverick. You know?
But it was clearly not.
It was the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
It was the wrong thing to do. But I'm not saying that he was like malicious and like, I'm going to crash this motherfucker out or anything like that.
No, that's true. But I do think, like you said, it was not, I think the punishment was quite lenient.
That's what I'm thinking. I don't know if this is a standard.
Yeah.
You know, but it seems like, you have to take a long lap penalty. And the other person is just like, you're done.
Yeah.
You know, so I know that the FIA, and I'm assuming the FIM, their mentality is we look at the infraction, we don't look at the outcome.
Yeah.
Because Maverick might have stayed on the bike and then he would have still received a long lap penalty. I know that this is the thought process, but it is quite interesting to me that, the other person is now, because I guarantee you Maverick would have stayed in the points and would have been able to score points. However, then Morbidelli did this really terrible thing where he tried to serve his long lap penalty, but essentially you have to stay in that zone of the long lap penalty, and he kind of swerved out of it.
He overshot it a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Probably too much speed going into it. So that meant that he had to serve another long lap penalty.
And for the first round that he did it, he had only really lost a position, I think. And then the second time he had to go back in, he ended up losing 2 more positions.
Yes.
Which, of course, hurts because that's valuable points that he needs because he is technically 4th in the overall rider championship. So, I mean, it does hurt him, but it's just also such a silly kind of mistake. And it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a little shitty.
And then also I really wanted to mention real quick at the start, Chantra had an issue when starting the warm-up lap. So he actually immediately got a long lap penalty for infracturing the start, which is like, so he kind of hurt himself, right? And obviously not on purpose. There was, I think, something wrong with the bike or anything, something like that. And then he gets 2 long lap penalties for, messing up with the starting procedure, where someone else crashing someone else gets a 1 lap long penalty. And I get this is probably the standard, but it seems like from the outside, it seems like interesting what you're getting punished for more harshly.
Yes, very true. I agree with that. I didn't even think about that, but that makes a lot of sense. We had some really fun battling on track also between the 2 KTMs, Pedro Acosta and Brad Binder. They were going back and forth quite a bit, which was really fun. I was really hoping that neither of them would crash out.
Yes.
I also want to just highlight Marco Bezzecchi. He started on 10th and he ended up coming in 5th.
Yeah,
which was really nice. He's been moving beautifully through the grid and making up a bunch of positions. Also, Ayo Ogura ended up coming in 10th, which I think is really nice and also just really great that he's back.
Made it into the points, yeah.
Exactly. Unfortunately, Furman Aldeguer, who's been having a really great season, especially as a rookie, he had some issue at the beginning where there was a lot of smoke, I remember, and I think he was doing like an evading action because he was worried about crashing into somebody. Yeah. So he had lost a bunch of positions.
A lot of positions, yeah. Because the track is obviously, the grid is so bunched together.
Yeah, exactly.
Going into T1.
He did end up making up a bunch, so he ended up coming in 12th, which was nice. And then we had, unfortunately, I forgot.
So Enea Bastianini didn't even finish lap 1.
Yes.
Then Jean Zarco unfortunately crashed out in lap 3. We talked about Maverick Vinales crashing out in lap 8. And then Jack Miller had to retire his bike in lap 9 after actually doing an overtake. And then they're like, come into the pits. There must have been something
I think
wrong
they said there was something with the clutch, if I'm not mistaken.
There was a clutch issue, correct.
Yeah, so that was just a bummer.
Then, I wanted to bring up real quick, our boy John Muir had a crash, but fortunately he was able to get back on the bike and finished in 11th position and scored 5 points.
I'm just so happy for him. Any race that he finishes, I am so happy.
I'm super happy for him too, scoring points on top of that.
Exactly, because we've been just seeing him crash so much, especially last season and the beginning of this one. So I'm so happy to see him finish races. I think the last big thing for this race is the last couple of laps that we need to talk about. The last couple of laps, so we had Mark in the front, like 1 to 2 seconds ahead at some point. Then we had Alex in second, and then about a half a second behind him, we had Pecco. And then, slowly but surely, throughout the last couple of laps of the race, Digi was suddenly getting closer to Pecco. Like, he had excellent race pace. He wasn't even on my radar for a good amount of time, just because we had Maverick and Frankie ahead of him for a long time until that whole thing happened. But there was a little bit of time between him and Pecco for a good amount of time. And then suddenly Digi was getting closer and closer and closer. And I was like, oh my gosh, is he going to get Pecco? And I was really conflicted.
Yes.
Because I wanted Pecco to have a good race for confidence, and also, mostly for confidence, because I just feel so bad for him, and also it being a home race in Italy. But then Digi is also an Italian race rider.
And he's part of the VR46 team, the Valentino Rossi team.
Also an Italian team.
Yeah.
So it's like, oof. I mean, I don't want him not to make it onto the podium.
I thought it was, however, very interesting. So he was creeping closer and closer. and closer, and then all of a sudden he's within slipstream, right?
Yes.
And I thought he was going to get him on a straight, but he didn't actually.
Yes.
He did the overtake in a corner where it seems like Bagnaia was just taking a wider line, and he was able to very easily, very beautifully make that overtake on the inside. And then what I thought was also really surprising, there was no fight back. And all of a sudden
Pecco just like started falling back more and more. And then by the end, he was almost 3 seconds behind. And it was within a lap.
Yes. And I will say, I think for Alex's sake, it was good that the race was over, because there was a 0.3 difference between him and Di Giannantonio when they went over the finish line. And so Mark was like 1.9 seconds out. He was in nowhere's land.
Yes.
He was completely 2 seconds is a lifetime in racing.
Yes.
But I think honestly, with maybe 1 or 2 more laps to go, I think Di Giannantonio would have maybe made it on the second place.
I would have liked for there to be a couple more laps just to see what DG could have done. He did say in his post-race interview that he was pushing a lot just to get by Pecco. And I mean, how exciting for him. Winning at home as an Italian.
Winning a third place.
I mean, yes. I mean, I feel like that's a win.
Yeah.
Being on the podium at home in an Italian team or with an Italian team, you know, I mean, it's such a great win. And then also, or great third place. And he's had a little bit of a tougher start of the season. He didn't quite click with the bike at the beginning. So now to see him up there I think is so exciting.
Yeah, especially because it seems like he was also capitalizing maybe also on, because originally I thought if someone from the 46 team might have had a chance to make it onto the podium, it would have been Morbidelli.
Yes, agreed.
But Morbidelli making 2 terrible mistakes.
Yes.
Really cost him. He finished in 6th, right?
Yeah.
But I did think that he would have had the potential to maybe, if out of anyone else on the grid, make a charge for the front, it would have been him. But it's a really, really happy surprise to see Di Giannantonio. I will say, it sounded, as a viewer, it sounded that the audience was quiet when he overtook Bagnaia.
Oh, yeah, because I mean, I think Pecco has just a bigger fan base.
Of course, he's
two-time world champion. So I get it. So I'm sure there was a little bit of like a conflict.
100%.
Because obviously you're happy to see an Italian on the podium with 2 Spaniards. You know, at least one person is on the podium. But it's like, it's not the guy that you necessarily wanted or were rooting for. So it's not, it is.
Yes, but I just thought.
I completely get it. And we also, which I thought was a little bit of a bummer, we didn't get to see his celebration lap as much, and he came back behind Alex and Mark because they were the first ones in the park farm, but Digi came by later, and I was like, oh, I would have loved to see him
I would have loved to see also maybe like Valentino there, because he was obviously, Valentino Rossi was there because it's obviously his team, and it's a home race for him. Talking about that, I do think there was maybe a little bit more of a focus on Marc Marquez, because Marc Marquez, they said it as the commentator said it, that he was actually not welcome for many years in Italy, because obviously there was a big rivalry between him and Valentino Rossi. There was the whole incident and stuff like that. And now Mark is obviously racing for the home team also, for
especially
Italy.
In Mugello.
Exactly. The Ducati factory team, which is their home race, is in Mugello. And once again, it had been 11 years since Mark had actually won there. So not probably a track that he really favors. And so for him to win, and then they gave him the flag,
the Ducati flag,
and then he went to the Ducati fan block, I'm assuming, and then he put the flag into the gravel.
He planted the flag.
Exactly, and he thanked the audience, which I'm sure it was like a conflicting thing for them, because like, yes, your team won, but it wasn't the guy that you wanted to win. And it's also the guy that for many years people truly hated. Yeah,
I was actually also, during the podium ceremony, I was like, oh, I wonder how the people will react, if there's going to be booing or not.
If there was, we didn't hear it.
And I was really trying to listen to it. I think there was a couple like whistles and stuff like that. They could go either way, of course.
Yeah.
But I think it was a lot more, I guess, the celebration was a little bit more tame.
Yes.
Because not their guy
won,
but it was still
team
Ducati. And I think that was also something that Mark had emphasized, because he was like, oh, Ducati one when he went onto the podium.
They were also, in case you didn't watch the race,
yes.
they were wearing a classic Ducati livery and suit.
Yeah, so I looked it up actually because I was really curious about it. So it's inspired by like the Renaissance.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's
Is it a fleur-de-lis?
No, I don't think so. Not that I had read.
Maybe it's
but
a
it's basically
different
it's a special livery inspired by the genius of the Renaissance, a symbol of excellence and ability in many different fields. And then so the two riders, so Pecco and Mark, are the two knights apparently. You know, modern day knights. And then so it's a mix or it's a collaboration between two designers to create this that merges like history and future and art and technique. And they used inspiration from the Italian Renaissance, on one hand from Leonardo da Vinci, the incarnation of the universal genius, and in harmony between art and science by Niccolo Machiavelli, aka the thinker of the dark side. So it's like
Machiavelli, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did I say?
Machiavelli? I thought it was Machiavelli.
I don't know. Yeah,
knows?
so him.
I don't speak Italian.
So it was like that kind of merge. And we were talking about it as we were watching it. I think up close,
it looks nice.
Gorgeous.
Yes.
It has this really deep burgundy and then gold accents, gold designs on it. And there's like this whole photo shoot that they did in Florence in this really beautiful building. And then playing chess, and I'm looking at the pictures now, and I
would be interested to see if some like professional chess player took a look at the chess pieces.
Oh,
because I don't know.
No, because they're still at the starting position.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
because I think a few years back there was a photo shoot with Ronaldo and Messi, and the chess pieces weren't playing.
Oh, yes.
But it was essentially, people were like, no one was actually favored in that play, and it's a real position.
Yes.
And it's essentially might end in a draw.
Yeah.
So I was wondering that.
Yeah, no. So these are still in like their starting lineup.
Who was
essentially.
on white? Do you know?
Do you want to guess who's on white?
Pecco.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, but it was so close up, it looked beautiful. I think. The colors, the design, and everything looked really nice because they also had it, of course, on their suits, and all the crew members had like a special shirt that they were wearing. But our criticism of it was a little bit that during the race,
you can't tell.
It was really hard because the numbers were in gold in the front, and you could only see them when it was really close. And unless you knew, of course, the helmet design, then you could tell like which rider was whom, or if you saw the booties, because you see
Get
either
Free
or Mark. Yeah, exactly. So that was the only criticism, that on the screen, and I'm sure also for the fans there, it was a little bit harder to...
Yes, I'm assuming probably the designers maybe don't have that in mind when making it. They're like, it has to just look beautiful.
Yes, and it looked beautiful.
It did. And I was also happy because last year when they did the vintage designs, the Ducati almost looked exactly the same.
Yes.
I couldn't tell the difference. I'm sure if you're a hardcore fan, you would be able to tell the difference. But us being a first-time watcher last year was not a thing.
Yeah.
I did also, the last thing I wanted to say about this week's Grand Prix, I think we have to mention Marc Marquez having his 93rd win in moto racing.
Like in all classes.
In all classes, his 67th in MotoGP. And obviously him wearing the 93. What an accomplishment.
Yes.
I think a lot of people are thinking he will most likely hit his 100 this year. I don't think they're counting sprint races. Are they?
No, I think it's just Grand Prix.
Exactly, Grand Prix. But I think 7 more
is doable.
Is doable for in the performance that he has right now.
Yes.
So a big, of course, compliments and shout out to him.
Yeah.
I think if you're thinking about, he has 33 left to go to hit 100 in MotoGP. Mark is 32. What is it? 23 races per season.
Yeah.
So depending on how many more seasons he's racing, I think it might be doable.
I think so.
Of course, you don't know how competitive he will be in 2 or 3 years from now. But what a huge accomplishment. I think the 100 is definitely doable this year. I would be surprised actually if he didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know how many races we have actually left.
I mean, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 races left. So if he wins almost just more than half, he will get it.
Which I think we wouldn't be surprised if he did.
Yes. I mean, yes. No, of course. And I do want him because I want him to win. But I wanted to continue to be
A competitive season.
Yes.
I will say, talking about being a competitive season, I saw reports online about this, and I think this might be true, that I think the charge for Pecco Bagnaia winning this year's season or title is almost over, because he's now 110 points away from Marc Marquez. Do you want to talk a little bit about the standing? Do you have it pulled up?
Yeah, I have it pulled up. So we have Marc Marquez in first with 270 points, and then 40 points behind him is his brother, Alex Marquez, which is also a thing. We talked about it last time. I love it. I love that the brothers are 1 and 2. And then in third, with 110 points behind is
there's
Pecco
a
Bagnaia.
70-point difference between Pecco and Marc.
Yes.
Pecco
and Alex. Yes. Which is a lot. And then in fourth, as I mentioned earlier, we have Frankie Morbidelli. He's there with 128 points, so 142 points behind Marc. And now today, Digi made up a bunch of points, because now he's in fifth. He was in fifth before that, but he is now just 8 points behind Frankie Morbidelli. So I think that's also really interesting.
It is very interesting. And I will also say it is a little bit devastating that Bagnaia is closer to Morbidelli in points than he is to even Alex.
Yeah.
That's really hard.
Yeah. It's
heartbreaking.
Yeah,
As I said, I'm not expecting him to win it. I'm not even expecting him to really fight for it or make it dangerous for Marc. I think the only person at this point who might be able to give him a run for his money at this point, I know 13 races is a lot, but the way he's going,
like if it continues the way it has been,
it will be Alex is the only one who can.
Yeah.
And the dangerous thing also with Marc is that he's winning sprint and he's capitalizing or maximizing both races.
Yes.
And we know how important the Saturday's races are for the championship. Looking at Jorge Martin winning because of the Saturday races, his championship last year. So
we'll see. But I'm excited. We have another race immediately next weekend. They're going to be racing in the Netherlands next weekend. Yes. So they're going to be there next weekend, which I'm very much excited about, that we don't have to wait
that long.
Again. Yeah, exactly. So that's going to be interesting to see.
So then this weekend, there was also the 24-hour race of the Nürburgring, which we did not watch because it was just not in the cards.
Yes.
However, we did watch some highlights.
Yes.
And I think there's only two things I want to talk about.
Yes. Well, there's one thing I did want to point out before we get into that. And there was one more thing we wanted to talk about for MotoGP.
Oh, yeah?
You were commenting about the commentators.
Oh, yes.
And I think that's something important to talk about before we get into the Nürburgring.
Yes. So the thing that I pointed out about the commentators while we were watching the race is, and we actually talked about this last year too, is that in my personal opinion, think that the commentators for MotoGP, that the ones that we're watching it essentially the TNT
Sports, yeah.
And we have the video pass. So the commentators that we're watching, I think they are one of the best commentators out there when it comes to any of the big racing commentating. I think they're a lot of times even much better than the F1 ones. I really love DC but what I don't like about some of the commentators in F1 is it's so sensationalized. I had watched a video this week where they were talking about, it was the last race, and where Kimi Antonelli was racing, trying to overtake Max Verstappen, and they were like, and the commentator was like, yes, and Kimi Antonelli on the charge, he hasn't scored points in the last 3 races, and then he moved on, right? And I'm like, that is factually correct, but you're also misinterpreting it, I think, especially for people who might have not kept up, who haven't watched, because it was like, oh wow, Kimi is doing really bad, he's not doing his races, but it's like Kimi DNF 3 races in a row, not being his fault, right? The car gave up on him. And I think putting things into context is very important, because now you're just putting out, it's clickbait essentially, and I get he's speaking the truth, but it's also like it's just frustrating to me, and I don't ever get that with MotoGP.
I agree. I think we've talked about it a bunch of times. Like we do. I mean, I love Formula One, and I do enjoy like DC, like his input, and I do like the other commentators as well, like Alex Jacks, if James Hinchcliffe is there. Joylan Palmer, they all have great input and they know a lot about the sport, which is great. But then, like you said, they sometimes like sensationalize it. I don't know. This is me maybe making a big leap. It's also maybe it's geared maybe sometimes towards like an American audience.
Yeah.
Where things can be
Because
more
we
sensationalized.
are technically watching the American broadcast, because if we would switch to international, which is the Sky broadcast, but I'm assuming that might be the same. To be
I don't know,
honest.
because we haven't listened to that one recently. We did it at the beginning, but now we've been just listening to the American broadcast of it.
I think DC was actually the big factor why we stopped listening to the other one.
Yeah. And then so I wonder if that's what it is. I could be completely wrong, but that's like my theory. But yes, I do love the MotoGP commentators. I honestly don't know who they are. I am so sorry.
Yes.
I have no clue, but I really enjoyed, because especially last season, our first season, hearing them talk about it and like breaking down the race and giving us also background information. And it was really, I learned so much about the sport because of them. And it was not in a way that I feel like people who watch MotoGP a lot will feel like, ugh, you're just saying this thing kind of again.
Yeah.
I think it's good for new people, but also for MotoGP, like long-time MotoGP fans, you know? I think it's a great balance. It's really entertaining. They also sometimes have little jokes that they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's, I just really, really enjoyed that.
Like, and also super passionate,
yes,
obviously.
Of course.
I will say, of course, there are other commentators that are really good. We watched some Formula 4 last year. There was this one guy who's so great. He was fantastic.
Yeah.
I unfortunately don't know his name either. I had last year watched, I think it was like this 4-hour endurance race of a Serbian championship, right? GT, and it was a guy who's commentating by himself, and he's great, right? Because 4 hours by yourself, right? No one you can, bounce things off of. He did a fantastic job. But if we're talking about the big ones, right? I really enjoy listening to them. I do also actually most parts like the WEC commentators. But it's just a standout to me and today, and I was like, I really appreciate their hard work. And I say this not knowing their names, but I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna know next time.
No, I agree. I want to know them a little bit better. But now let's talk about the 24-hour race in Nürburgring.